The Philadelphia Eagles are back home this weekend, taking on the Denver Broncos as they look to remain undefeated. Meanwhile, on the offensive side of the ball, one issue has flown way under the radar, and a lot of people are wondering what's going on. Well, today I think the Eagles finally revealed the answer to that huge question. We'll talk about that and a few keys for the Eagles to get another win this weekend. All that and more coming up here on A to Z Philly, but welcome into the show. I'm RB. And we're back, man. How does it feel to be undefeated? Now that the A.J. Brown stuff and all that drama is put behind us, I'm ready to watch this team go out there for yet another week, hopefully put it all together for 4 quarters and finally get this done. So we're going to talk about the Eagles versus the Broncos and a couple things to keep our eyes on. But first, a few roster moves. And I don't know what Howie is doing logistics-wise. Maybe he's just bored and having some fun with an undefeated team. But the Eagles have actually cut and signed the same players to the practice squad. So 20 hours ago, the Eagles go out and they signed Jacob Sykes and KJ Henry to the practice squad, and they release Eli Ricks and Antoine Powell-Ryland. And then they come out today and they do the exact opposite. They release Jacob Sykes and KJ Henry, and they sign Eli Ricks and Antoine Powell-Ryland. So I don't know what that was for. Maybe there's like a trick up their sleeve, or they're planning to do something, or maybe Howie, like I said, is just having fun. But anyway, the Eagles now have a couple more players on their practice squad. And speaking of practice squad, Nakobe Dean practiced this week, and he will not be making his debut just yet. They're probably going to give him 1 or 2 more weeks to get really fully healthy. We talked about that a few days ago, what could happen with the Jahad Campbell situation. But Nakobe Dean says that he will not be activated this week versus Denver. So something to keep our eyes on. I would anticipate he makes his return probably next week if I had to predict. Now, with the guys on the field, right, the offense has been inconsistent. They've had a lot of drama and issues, and it all revolves around A.J. Brown and his comments. But we have to talk about Saquon Barkley, right? Last year, he goes above 2,000 yards, probably could have been the regular season all-time leading rusher, but he was, when you take into account postseason combined. Needless to say, Saquon Barkley had almost 400 carries. Like, he had a huge workload, right? We look at the accolades, we look at the stats, how special he was, the big-time runs he broke off, and all that in the third that helped this team win the Super Bowl and be dominant the way they were. But what we don't really realize when we peel back the layers is how much burden was on the offensive line. And to start this season, if we look at Saquon Barkley's stats, he is averaging 3.1 yards per carry, which is the second lowest in his career. The only other time was 1.8, but that was the season where he only played 2 games before getting injured. So really, he is having some career lows so far through 4 games. He's only averaging 59 yards a game, and he just doesn't look the same. However, there have been flashes. There's been certain plays where he starts to look like he's going to break one off, and then he gets stopped in his tracks. And I think it's fair to say that defenses have really adjusted, and they're playing him different. They're loading up the box, right? They're putting so much attention on Saquon Barkley, and he's going to have to be patient. And I believe he will end up breaking off some big runs. I'm not concerned with Saquon at all. He doesn't look washed. He doesn't look like he lost a step. He doesn't look hurt. But the offensive line has not been anywhere near productive that they usually are, right? They are the pillars of this team. Howie always builds in the trenches, and we always talk about the offensive and the defensive lines. And if you had told me through 4 weeks that the defense would look more polished than the offense, I'd say you're crazy. But on the offense, we didn't expect the offensive line to look this tired out so far. It looks like they could use a bye week. And, I could point to Jordan Mailata or Lane Johnson getting hurt the last couple weeks, or Landon Dickerson, who's been playing through that injury he suffered in August. Whatever it is, they're just not playing as solid as they usually are. They're not as superior. And Jordan Mailata spoke on this yesterday. Here's what he had to say, quote, "To be really honest, I feel like crap. It was the worst I've ever felt in an offseason." He's talking about this past offseason. "Usually it takes maybe a week or 2 for the aches and the pains from the season to go away, but it lasted well over a month and into the OTAs. He says that is the residual effect of last year's 2,000 yards from Saquon Barkley, because again, you think about all that Saquon put into this and how many carries he had, but think about what those boys up front did and how they had to consistently block sometimes 30, 40, 45 times a game. And I mean, they were putting in a lot of work. So we have to realize what they have put themselves through, and especially being heavier men as it is. Plus, when you play extra games into the postseason and your season is extended, you're not going to recover as fast. So I think that is very important to take into consideration. I respect Jordan Mailata for being open and honest about it. And of course, I think the passing offense being better will also be a compliment to that as well. And speaking of which, Jalen Hurts talked about his relationship with A.J. Brown, saying it's good. We share a great passion for the game, and we are focused on this week. Speaking of this week, it's going to be a very interesting task, and here is the promo post put out by the Eagles, right? You see Courtland Sutton, Quinyon Mitchell. Will Quinyon Mitchell shadow Courtland Sutton? I think there's a chance he does, but I'm thinking about the other side. I'm thinking about A.J. Brown against Patrick Surtain. And if we go over and we look at the Denver Broncos stats on defense, they are right now 8th in the league in yards given up. So the Denver Broncos are top 10 in defense. By the way, they're also top 10 in offense. They've beat 2 teams that are really not that good, and they've also lost to 2 teams barely, in the last play of the game. So Denver is overall a good team. Are the Eagles better? Yes. Even watching some of the other games going on, I ask myself, can this team talent-wise stack up to what the Eagles can be at their peak? And every time the answer is no. The Eagles are by far the most talented team in the NFL. And the numbers are really deceiving because the Eagles, are in the lower third when it comes to the offense, mainly because of their passing. And, the defense has been giving up a lot of points late. But I think the defense giving up those points has really been due to the Eagles offense being lackluster in certain halves. And if you look at Vic Fangio, he's doing a great job of adjusting. They're blitzing 33% of the snaps. Eagles have the second highest rate of man coverage in the NFL so far in 2025. They have a lot of young players who are adapting to the game and learning their positions still. And the Eagles also are defending the lowest completion percentage by opposing quarterbacks. So there are some stats where they look really, really good, and there's some stats where they don't look as good, but I think those are a bit deceiving, and once the offense comes around, I think they're going to be fine. All that to say, the Denver Broncos are going to be a test. I don't think the Broncos are just going to be some easy win. Matter of fact, they might be the hardest game yet, because the Denver Broncos have given up the least amount of touchdowns in the NFL. They have the most sacks in the league, and they have 2 great edge rushers in Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito, who have a combined 7 sacks right now. And just for reference, the Eagles edge rushers have half a sack this season. So Denver is generating pressure. They have really good corners. Pat Surtain is the best corner in the game, and he's going to shadow A.J. Brown. They also have guys like Alex Singleton. Remember him? How productive he was as an undrafted linebacker? He's been playing really well for Denver. Both of their safeties in Brandon Jones and Hufanga are playing well. I think they have a pretty good roster overall. But like I was just saying, the Eagles have the advantage because they have the mastermind of Vic Fangio, and the Eagles defense, like it says here, has actually been the reason for the wins. They are keeping the Eagles in these games. They've gone up against really good quarterbacks, all that have been multiple-time Pro Bowlers, so they've played some of the really good quarterbacks. Now they're going up against a young quarterback in Bo Nix, who has been productive, but he's not afraid to let the ball fly up in the air and turn it over. He's going to play very aggressive, and I think that plays into what Vic Fangio is going to do to try to throw him off his game. So I think the Eagles defense can definitely hold up in this game. If you look at the Broncos offense, yes, J.K. Dobbins is having a career year so far on the ground, but he has been injury prone in the past. Yes, the Broncos have that double-headed monster going in the backfield with R.J. Harvey as well. But when you look at their wideouts, do they have anybody that's really special? Courtland Sutton, I think, has a couple 1,000-yard seasons. Troy Franklin, second year in the league, and Marvin Mims. Are any of these guys really over-the-top elite? No, I don't think so. And I think when you look at the Eagles secondary of Quinyon and Coop, and I guess it's going to be Keely Ringo this week. Maybe Adoree will be back and in the mix. Who knows who they're going to start? But you have Reed Blankenship, you have Nakobe. I don't think the Broncos are going to be able to take the top off the Eagles defense this week. Really, again, for me, what I think it comes down to is the war of attrition up front with the line of scrimmage. The Denver defense is going to do a lot. They're going to bring a lot of pressure at Jalen Hurts. They're blitzing a lot. And the Eagles O-line has to be healthy enough to hold up, right? You can't have Lane Johnson and Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens going out in this game and getting banged up. They have to be healthy and they have to be rock solid up front. I'm hoping this is the game where Saquon Barkley can finally break one off. But again, all comes back to the consistency of the passing game. Eagles have 7 rushing touchdowns on the year. Of course, that's in big part due to Jalen Hurts, and I do expect him to improvise a lot in this game and probably run for, I don't know, 50 to 80 yards and maybe a touchdown or two, a couple big tush-push plays. The Denver defense doesn't give up a lot of touchdowns. So in the red zone, where the Denver defense has been number 1 in the NFL, are the Eagles going to be able to execute? By the way, Eagles are still 11 for 11 in the red zone, which is perfect, which is almost impossible at this point, and it's pretty crazy. So I really think that red zone offense versus the Denver red zone defense will be a huge matchup. And last but not least, here's DeVonta Smith today with Christian Parker at practice. Really cool clip of Christian Parker giving some praise to Quinyon after last game that came out yesterday. But I'm looking at DeVonta Smith, and with Pat Surtain on A.J. Brown, sure, they may try to force it to AJ a little bit after his comments. I really see an opportunity for DeVonta Smith up against most likely Riley Moss to exploit that and have a big game. And I think this could be the DeVonta game. I think he could go for a deep touchdown in this game. I think the Eagles are going to take some shots, especially with Denver maybe going with a couple all-out blitzes and trying to get to Jalen and shaking some things up. I do think they will be a little light at points in the secondary, and I think the Eagles will have to take a shot. They're going to test them. The Birds have to be much more consistent. We saw it last week in the first half. They can do that. They have to replicate it. So nonetheless, I do think this will be a tight matchup, a really good game, but the Eagles back at home with the link buzzing. They're 4-0, trying to stay undefeated. Everybody's coming for the Eagles, but Vic Fangio, former Denver Broncos coach, and he's got a lot of experience there. Sean Payton's a really good coach, but I think Vic Fangio will be able to get to the young quarterback. I think the Eagles will make enough plays to win the game. Might not be perfect, but I think they will improve after all the scrutiny this week. I'm taking the Eagles to win this game 24-20 to stay undefeated and advance to 5-0. Give me your thoughts down below. What's your main key of this game? What's your final score prediction? Appreciate everybody for tapping in. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I will catch you on the next one.